Hi, I'm Beverly, and this is Pain and Simple Makes. Today we're going to make a fabulous wreath using a book. So you can take any book that you want to. The book that I chose for this project, excuse me, is actually one that I used when I was working on my doctorate. It's on writing dissertations, and so since I'm through with that, hallelujah, I don't think I'll need this book anymore, so I decided that I would sort of commemorate that whole journey by making this book into a wreath. So the first thing you want to do is to start tearing your pages out, and you can see I just started at the beginning and tore out pages. I think it took me about 57 to 60 pages total to make this wreath. So once you have your pages torn out, you want to start at the bottom corner. This would be like the outside edge of the page. You want to start rolling so that you end up with a cone shape, as you can see here. And once you get to the end, just use some hot glue. I usually just do a little triangle there with the hot glue and then finish wrapping, and that should hold it just fine. Now you may notice and wonder about the ragged edges on the side where I ripped it out of the book. This is a choice you can make. I like that look. It's kind of a bohemian, maybe more farmhouse type look, but if you want something a little more refined, then by all means trim that edge up. Just make sure you don't cut away too much, because you do need to have enough paper left to roll up into a cone. So this is actually a pretty easy project, and you don't need very many materials. You just need an old book, some hot glue, and a wreath form. Now the wreath form that I'm using is a 12-inch styrofoam form, and you'll see in a minute how we're going to put this all together. So you can see my wreath form here, and I've got all of my cones made for the first layer. And honestly, when I first started this wreath, I wasn't sure if I was going to have just one layer or two layers. So I built the first layer, and then I went back and decided I liked the second layer better. So once you have all your cones made, then you're going to take your hot glue gun and just lay down a line of hot glue on top of that wreath form, just like this. And then once you've done that, you're just going to press a cone onto the top of that hot glue. And I like to put the edge where I glued the cone together down. That's just a preference, and later on you'll see I actually did not do that. I wasn't paying close enough attention. Also note that under my hand here, the very first cone I put down, I actually glued it so that it was sort of even with the inside edge of the wreath form, and that was a mistake. I did not mean to do that. And you can see with the rest of these that I'm extending the tip of that cone into the center of that wreath form. And this will make it a little fuller, but ultimately we're going to put a top layer on, and it's going to cover this up anyway. But you know, you can probably tell here with just what I have laid down that you're going to be able to see that wreath form through there with just one layer. And I'm trying to close that up right there, but honestly it doesn't work very well, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to go with the second layer. Also, I just really didn't like the look of the single layer. And you can see here I'm filling in, getting all the way around the wreath form with my cones. And because the wreath form is rounded, I have to hold each of the cones in place for a few seconds just to make sure that glue will hold it there. If I just press it down and then start on my next one, it usually won't hold and it'll fall off. So I just press it for a few seconds and it's working well. Okay, so for the second layer, I ripped out some more pages. I ripped out about 20 more pages and I cut them in half. And the reason that I'm cutting them in half is because they're going to lay on top of the first layer, so I don't want them as big as that first layer. And I'm also going to be pushing the ends into the center more, and if they were full size, then they would be trying to overlap as I went around, and I don't want that. I need to still have a space in the middle. So you want to rip out about, if you're doing a 12-inch wreath, you want to rip out about 20 more pages, cut them in half, so you've got about 40 small sheets, and then you're going to roll them into cones just like we did the big ones. So you can see here that I rolled it from the corner, and now on this other corner I'm just putting a little triangle of hot glue and finishing the roll, and I've got a nice cone there. So starting with that corner opposite of the tear, I am just rolling. And you can see that each cone is just a little bit different, and I kind of like that, and it gives it, again, it gives it that more relaxed feel. All right, so I'm getting ready to put this top layer on, and I want to make sure that I maintain a fairly round center in my wreath. So I just have this little bucket from a 4th of July picnic party that I had a few years ago. It's just lying around in my craft room. So I'm going to use it sort of as a placeholder. So I put that down on my table, and I put my wreath around it so that there is kind of an even amount of space all the way around. And so I glue my first cone on, and I make sure the tip of that cone touches the bucket or is nestled right up next to it. And this is how I'm going to maintain that circle all the way around. So you can see that I am adding the shorter cones so that they stick out beyond the edge of the first layer. But the big part of the cone, see what's happening here is the big part of the cone is actually covering up the spaces between the cones on the bottom layer. And this is going to help to hide any of the wreath form that you didn't get covered up. So you want to make sure that you place each of these top cones between two of the bottom cones, and that will cover everything up that you don't want seen on your wreath form. Now let's say that you really want to be doubly sure that you can't see any of that wreath form when you're done. What you could do, and I didn't do this, but what you could do is cover the wreath form in pages from your book before you ever start with the cones, so that you just wrap those pages around and glued them down, and then you can start layering your cones, and that would be something else that you can do. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, click like below and hit the subscribe button, and see BeverlyPayne.com for more projects.